Everyone, welcome to another episode of Health Tech with Purpose. Today we have Joseph DeVivo joining us on our show. Joseph is President, Chief Executive Officer, and Chairman of Board at Butterfly Network, which is a digital health company transforming care through the power of portable, semiconductor-based ultrasound technology and intuitive software. Join us on this exciting episode where we learn how AI and portable medical devices are improving diagnosis, treatment, and patient outcomes.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm doing very well, very well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic as well, especially the kind of times we are in where there is a news every day. It's, no day is a dull day, I would say. So it's all good. And we continue to innovate, I believe. Yes, all of us.
It's incredible times, both good and bad. There's definitely some craziness around us, but it's an incredible time to be alive.
Right, right. Through that, I agree. So, why not, Joe? Let's start with a bit of background about you. I mean, I know you have been like in health, for decades. So you've seen it all. You have seen companies grow, companies evolve, and so on. And I think, in fact, the trends that we sit on today, probably, you would have seen they being, changed from an inspiration to action in front of you. So, tell us a bit of background about your work and, in the last 25 years, if you were to summarize, how would you put it?
Well, Ayush, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Um, I've been blessed. Me being in healthcare was a complete serendipity. My father came to this country, an Italian blacksmith. He got a job making garbage trucks. He ultimately, the business went out of business and he bought it, and he and his brother built this business, and then he made garbage containers. And I thought that that's what I would do with my life. I would come into my father's business, who had a big steel fabrication facility, and that'd be it. But it wasn't. We had some family challenges, and my next door neighbor was the founder of a sensational company called US Surgical.
Mm.
And he gave me a chance when my family went through these difficulties to be a salesperson.
Mm.
And that is what brought me into healthcare in 1993 when I joined. And if for anyone who knows US Surgical, it was it was the first company, or one of the first, that really invested heavily in sales training. We were working on advanced surgical devices that were changing behaviors of surgeons, that the things they were doing, whether it was surgical stapling or laparoscopic surgery, weren't things that these clinicians learned in their medical training. So they were learning it while in practice, and they leaned heavily on the companies for, post-doctorate training.
Mhm.
And they leaned heavily on people like myself. And I really, for my first 10 years, most doctors will say they did their residency at this place, and that residency is where they trained under this particular doctor and how they've developed their philosophy. Well, I did my residency at a company called US Surgical, and that's where I learned innovation. There was a maverick founder, Leon Hirsch, who had just passed away recently, and I owe so much of my professional career to. And that's where I started. And so minimally invasive surgery with laparoscopic cholecystectomy, laparoscopically assisted vaginal hysterectomies, Nissen fundoplications, all these different procedures then bled into surgical robotics. I became infatuated with robotics. I became very close to Dr. Yulin Wang, who, in my view, is the founder of surgical robotics. I joined Computer Motion and had a wonderful time learning there. But soon thereafter, Computer Motion and Intuitive Surgical merged.
Mhm.
Not many people realize this, but about a third of Intuitive is owned by Computer Motion shareholders, and that was basically the split at the time. And Probably one of my biggest regrets is I didn't stay at Intuitive for the big run up. I was young. I had a lot of different kinds of energy, and I chose to continue with my career. But I've been very blessed, and I don't really begrudge any experience that's been given me. But I went on to run a Rita Medical, which was a oncology device company for inoperable tumors. I went to be president of Smith and Nephew to run a $2 billion orthopedic division for reconstruction. I went to become CEO of AngioDynamics,
Mhm.
which was an interventional radiology and oncology device and catheter company, wonderful company, founded by Eamon Hobbs, who's a great founder. And then I got into digital, and then my life really changed because I went to California, joined Dr. Yulin Wang's second company, which was In Touch Health. His first was surgical robots.
Mhm.
And interestingly, one of the things he did prior to his second company was an experiment. And it's really fascinating because, a surgical robot has a workstation where a doctor is working at that console. And Yulin was fascinated with the 20 feet worth of cable that connected the doctor to the robot.
Okay.
And he asked himself the question, well, if there's 20 feet of cable, what if we replace that 20 feet of cable with 4,000 miles of cable? He brought Professor Jacques Marescu from Strasbourg, France to New York City. He sent the surgical robots to Strasbourg, France. And
Okay.
in the most complex, largest, most expensive operation ever in the world, Professor Marescu removed the gallbladder from his patient in France, sitting in New York City, in 43 minutes. And so that informed him that, that clinical discipline and training was capable to be transmuted beyond the physical being and the physical space. And so he built a company called In Touch Health that helped neurologists consult with patients and consult with doctors who were at rural hospitals that were going through a stroke.
Mhm.
And these patients, within an hour, hour and a half, were going to fully, if they didn't have any intervention, would fully stroke out.
Mhm.
Normally, they're put into an ambulance and sent to a hospital. But Dr. Wong built an infrastructure to help these doctors in large cities consult with doctors in rural hospitals to make clinical decisions that were life-saving. And that distance health, that telemedicine, so much of the telemedicine that you've heard of is what we're doing now, this video type call. But what he did was bring it between hospital and hospital so specialists can consult for complex activities. And that grew into a very big business. And then today, actually, Dr. Wong is on his third company now, where he is helping other robot companies break apart the console and the robot so they can provide distance health, actually, not as an experiment, but they can do distance surgery. So I'm very
Okay.
fascinated with
Interesting.
that. And then I've recently joined Butterfly, and Butterfly is a fast. And then I was blessed to go to Butterfly. Butterfly is a very unique device, semiconductor based, that allows every doctor and every nurse to have an imaging device in their pocket. Cloud-based digital, and it really empowers rural health and healthcare where the patients are. So I've been very blessed to have wonderful career, wonderful mentors, and it's just been, Ayush, a great journey.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, I could sense, of course, like hard work makes its own luck, but definitely can see you have been at some of the best mentors and some of the best companies that got built in your time. So, yeah, I mean, can't stop myself being jealous in a good way. Like a lot of learnings here. Great. And, probably, in the next 30 minutes, we'd like to take some of that wisdom. So, moving forward, talking more about Butterfly, like what I understand and what we read about is it's a MedTech device, which is a portable semiconductor based ultrasound tech. So tell us more about the concept and how it works, what impact does it create, and how does it changes the world?
So a standard ultrasound device that you would see in a hospital, say a cart, you've ever seen, it's like a computer that comes up to you.
Right. Yeah.
And then they have these probes, and there's four different handles or four different probes with four wires that connect into the cart. And each probe has a different frequency and depth for the different type of imaging you would do in the body. If you're going to do an image looking at the heart, you would use one frequency. If you're going to look at the abdomen, you'd use another, the lung, MSK, peripheral vascular. And so each of these are pre-tuned, almost like a pre-focused camera lens that you pick up the next camera for the next type of image you wish to take. And that's how imaging has been done for ultrasound for decades. And based upon the amount of power they put through the system and the type of algorithms that are generated in the power, and the transducer determines how good of an image you can get. But those devices are large, and those devices are tethered to a hospital room. Butterfly and Dr. Jonathan Rothberg came up with a concept of building a semiconductor and then putting on top of the semiconductor what's called a MEMS wafer. And a MEMS wafer has 9,000 individual sensors that are organized in a rectangle, which is very similar like a screen that you and I are looking at now, where there's a pixel. And all these pixels, you change the color of a pixel and then sit back, and there you have an image with a collection of them all. Well, our semiconductor allows us to tune to any frequency, to tune to the different wavelengths, curved, linear, and phased array wavelengths, and then different frequency depths. So basically, we have one device that can meet all of these different imaging requirements. And what it allows is you take your iPhone and you plug the device into an iPhone, and now you can image a patient's carotids. You can look for an appendectomy. And we believe now that this is entering in a new era of imaging because doctors can carry around their device. Supercomputers used to be huge. Now we carry one in our pocket. Everyone has one, and that's an iPhone. Well, imaging devices are huge. Everyone will have this imaging device. And because it's so powerful with semiconductors, it also is on this exponential innovation curve that every several years, as the power of the chip and the power of the MEMS technology increases, we deliver more and more power into the device. And so we've now placed about 150,000 devices around the world. We are in conflict areas, like we have 1,000 of them in Ukraine, where every medic has one, because if they're dealing with someone who is now been traumatized, they don't have to wait to go into the hospital. They don't have to decide which probe to use. They just say, I'm going to scan the abdomen on the phone. They select abdomen. It then tunes the device for an abdominal scan, and they go within seconds. So it's about 2/3 of the world doesn't have access to imaging. And Butterfly now becomes a way to bring imaging with the doctor to the patient where they are.
Right, right. Yeah. And that sounds super useful given the whole trend of moving health, say one outside the hospital, second providing a continuity in care, and of course being able to bring in more health equality where people from different backgrounds or different circumstances could basically participate. So, like one of the interesting things, Joe, I could pick up from your experience was, you have been, in the midst of helping clinicians change behavior by introducing these new devices. And what many of my friends in health tell is that's one of the most difficult things to do because clinicians and providers and hospitals, like everybody, like to be in their own way of doing things and do not want to change their difficult to deal with. But from what I hear, you have successfully, gone through those LAs. So tell us more from your experience, if any lessons around selling to the hospital, selling to the clinicians, changing behavior of providers. Please expand on that.
Sure. So there are several things that I would give advice for. The first thing I would give advice on is play the long game.
Mhm.
Don't expend all your resources off of a timeline that you think you control. You don't control it. There are
Mhm.
things you can control in your physical development, but in truth, you don't really have control over how long it will take to get your product perfect,
Mhm.
and then how long it will take to change the behavior, to make the arguments, to get the right data, and to have your technology truly meet the needs of the customer. I was chairman of a startup called SurgiQuest a while back. And it was a wonderful experience because the CEO was an old US surgical colleague and dear friend of mine. And he had the instinct that when we were ready to go commercial, most people would hire a sales force. They would
Mhm.
hire a full organization, they'd go for it, national sales meeting, training, rah, rah. But Kurt had the wisdom to not know whether or not he was ready. He just didn't know. And so he hired one salesperson
Mhm.
and he put him in Connecticut. And he gave him not the whole country, but he gave him a geography that would be akin to what a normal territory size was. And he studied the behavior of that one rep. And he studied how that one rep did with the doctors in the territory. How quickly did they uptake the technology? What was their feedback? And this is after they'd done their work and thought they were ready. And that experience taught them how unready they were and
Mhm.
how actually a new revision of the technology was needed because they identified some things in the learnings when you get into the implementation. So really plan for a longer game. Don't let the investors or don't let your ego get in the way to say, this is ready. I believe it to be ready. And then you go, because many companies burn through their initial invested capital by going too fast, too quick. You really have to take your time and covet the resources you have and
Mhm.
be sure that you're ready. Because when you're ready, then you'll know, because you don't need to hire 20 salespeople who are all going to fail. If I hire one salesperson who fails, then that's what my consequence was, right? So
Right.
it's like a test site. The second thing I would tell inventors is don't fall in love with your technology.
Mhm.
Fall in
Easier
love with
said
your
than done.
customer. Fall in love with your customer.
Mhm.
Your customer is what matters. And I've learned that you got to be careful because a lot of the doctors um, know what they want, but or think they know what they want, but they don't know what they need. And so you have to really study them. You have to really understand truthfully what problems you're solving. And just because your technology does it a certain way doesn't mean it's right. So if
Mhm.
you listen to the customer and you're true about the experience they have with your product, then you ultimately are going to come up with a winner. And just to give you that example with SurgiQuest, they made a trocar device, which is the device that you use to insert into the abdomen to maintain the pressure in the air to get the abdomen away from the internal organs so you can do these operations. And the first version was pushing air in and creating an air seal. So when you push an instrument in and out of the device, you don't have any friction. But what he failed to realize was as you keep pushing air into the abdomen, it has to go someplace, and there turned into some issues.
Mhm.
So he learned and he listened and he tested, and he ultimately created a way to recycle the air.
Mhm.
And the recycling of the air not only allowed the seal to work, it
Mhm.
created a whole new product, which was smoke evacuation and automatic pressure management. And today it's almost a standard of care in surgery. And so it takes you about 10 years to become an overnight success,
Right.
especially in healthcare. And it's a function of staying true to the core innovation that you're creating, but then building that bridge to exactly how a customer would interface it. Even if it's not logical to you, you have to listen to your customer. And if you stay on that journey, and if you don't burn through your dry powder and you maintain your patience, you're going to get there. You just keep cycling and cycling, listening and iterating, listening and iterating, listening and iterating. And don't just choose, okay, now my product is frozen and now I'm going to hire a big sales force. There's probably 8 out of 10 of those companies fail because they run out of resources. Then they dilute down all the original shareholders. They bring in all this new money. They turn over management teams.
This episode of Health Tech with Purpose podcast is brought to you by MindBowser, a product engineering and digital transformation company focused on health. At MindBowser, we enable health companies to build the future of health where accessible, equitable, and patient care.
We strongly believe that technology can empower a healthier world, and that's why we are partnering with healthcare experts like yours to make it happen.
Hi guys, thanks for listening to Health Tech with Purpose. Make sure to subscribe us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube for more expert insights on industry innovation and transformation. And remember, share the knowledge.
And then they continue to listen to customers, right? So it's a cycle where I would, if I was starting something from scratch today, I would prepare my investors for a longer haul. I would take my time to get my innovation right. And then when it was right, then I would go for it. But I think patience, not falling in love with your technology and falling in love with your customers, is probably, some of the best advice I can give.
Right. No, very, I'd say, deep wisdom there. And of course, everybody knows in theory, but I think it becomes difficult when you apply to yourself. So, but yeah, well said. I think, especially, I like the aspect about not basically going all in unless you have proven, the efficacy or the importance or product market fit, as they say now.
Because once you have one territory that's now successful, that one salesperson in Connecticut is now building a business in that geography, then it's very simple to replicate and manufacture, right?
Right.
You take all the different, the training and the business process and the customer interface, you learn from that one experience, and then now you multiply it and build out a national organization, or for that matter, a global organization.
Right. As they say, finding one customer is harder than 10, and 10 is harder than 100.
Very much so. That's so true.
Yeah. So, Joe, another aspect that I'd like to pick from your experiences is, connecting some of the dots from the past to build the future. How do you see the current, I'd say, wave of health innovation that is happening? Do you see that has always been there, or do you see something special about this time? Because many of the problems we are trying to solve have existed for at least a decade, if not longer, like interoperability or making life easy of a physician or freeing them from clinical works. So definitely there's AI, which has its own promise, but with you having that experience under your belt, seeing through the ages of how health really has worked in the past, what is your understanding and your takeaways as you think about the innovations happening today?
That's a great question. Things are changing. And when I remember when I started off in healthcare, I was specifically taught as a sales rep to not engage with the patient. Patient is responsibility of the doctor. Your responsibility is the doctor, is the training of the doctor, and then the doctor helps manage the patient. What I think is changing, and has changed with electronic health records now, is hospitals now have potentially more data on your product than you do. And the evolution of the electronic health record has been, in the near term, very unfavorable for doctors because it's very laborious, et cetera. but it will change. The automations are coming, and AI, automated data capture, whether through voice, note-taking, et cetera, is going to change that for doctors and is going to change that for healthcare. And I think healthcare companies have to be, and what'll happen is the day of the prospective randomized trial, of course, for drugs and very large consequential interventions will always be in place. But the world is also is evolving very quickly towards real-time data. And that's what I love about Butterfly, and what I loved about InTouch was, InTouch, we had a robot. Butterfly, we have an ultrasound device. But every device is connected into the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And every device, when it's used, at Butterfly, we have 20 million images in our cloud, growing between 30,000 and 40,000 images a day.
Mm-hmm.
So we have complete connectivity to the behavior of our customers, and we have data that suggests usage and what we can learn from. And so we use that for training, we use that for AI development.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't imagine today a medical company who doesn't have some type of tie into the data and the experience that their product is having on a daily basis. So I believe that medical companies today, like in my past, it was never about having the data from the patient. You can do a clinical trial, but then you support doctors, they support the patient, and then they work within that environment. Today, data is so much more readily available. With the emergence of the electronic health record, yes, doctors have taken a major step back from a standpoint of the amount of laborious nature healthcare is for them, but that will change. There are new automation tools in the creation of the record. And there's going to be a lot of learning from those experiences that are going to make clinicians much, much more productive and also knowledgeable on the impact that they're having in patients. And I think, when systems have more data on the interface of your device than you do, I think it puts you at a disadvantage. And so companies need to find ways to interact with their devices and interact with their technology to manage that data. It's essential. And Butterfly is one of those companies because we have a cloud. We have 150,000 devices connected to that cloud. We're streaming 30 to 40,000 images a day. We know what presets they use, how long they're on the device. We know where they are. We know the different type of clinical applications. And then we have, of course, this database of imaging that we can run all kinds of AI scripts through to help learn from the imaging, to understand the utilization. And that gives us tremendous power to know our customers and then be able to develop more and more tools to be able to make it easier and easier for them. For us, ultrasound, or for anybody, ultrasound is the hardest image to acquire.
Right.
You have to be able to know how to acquire it, and then you need to know what it is you're looking at. Whereas other more complex imaging has great automation. So anyone who's developing a new device and developing a new software, a new interface, they really have to think about how can they collect and how can they close the loop on the experience? How can they acquire data and then learn from that data and spiral that evolution? And I think that's what's different. Is if you sit back and you just make a piece of plastic and sell it in a one-way fashion, I think you're going to lose a lot of control. But if you think about how you can be a part of that overall experience and how you can learn from that, the largest companies now are thinking about cloud, are thinking about software interface to hardware. Back in the day, when I had a piece of hardware in the hospital, I had to send a rep into the hospital with a USB stick to put a software update.
Right.
Now there are ways to communicate to your devices through the firewalls of hospitals to be able to push update software, but also pull performance data that is germane to your technology. And if you organize that well and you set up the security protocols correctly, hospitals will let you do this. And it creates tremendous power. When we now sit with our customers, we have a full report that we show them as to how they're interfacing with our product. We tell them what they're doing well. We show them how much money we're saving. We show them how many physicians are properly using it, trained, and also how many need additional development. And then we have a menu of recommendations on how they can have a better experience. So when and customers love that. They love when you bring them data. They love when you bring them their data because they want to get better. And then they look at you as a partner who's a part of their journey, not a vendor who's trying to extract something. And it's that learning that I think today companies have the ability to create even greater value than they did, 20 or 30 years ago. And they can learn faster and they can make their technologies easier from this advanced cycling and advanced learning.
Mhm. No, well said. I think definitely there is more possibilities that are achievable today as compared to what it was, but it also creates, I would say, more competition as a disadvantage is what I can think because possibly more people can build as compared to like in the past probably monopolies could exist for a longer time, which could mean that they could possibly put in more money for innovation back because they had probably a longer time to create that competitive advantage. Do you agree?
Look, when you think about software, for example, you know, software is very hard to protect with IP, right? It's very hard to protect and say, okay, you can't code that way. And of course, everyone has their proprietary code, but the way you win is through rapid iteration.
Right.
And by moving quickly and responding. And you can stay ahead of your customers if you have a unique idea, you're solving a unique problem, and you have the data to learn from to run. Because then someone starting from scratch, regardless of how good regardless of how good their way of fast following is, they have to now make up for all that evolution that you have. So I wouldn't be fearful. I've never really been afraid of my competition. I've always just tried to build the best product and then learn and train and grow and run.
Right.
And as long as you're listening to your customers and you're continually innovating and you have those closed loop set of feedback, you can maintain your lead and you can maintain that market. And then now you're executing well, you're endearing yourself, you're not creating reason to go to a competitor. I've never been afraid of a competitor. I've always been afraid of losing the hearts and minds of my customers.
Right. Well said. No, definitely that's I think the way to see it. It's more about your customers. If they are happy, nobody can basically
Look,
replace
then
you.
all of a sudden, okay, you can become successful, and then you can get content, and then you can stop listening to your customer, and then you can just look at your stock price or read your press, and then gaps are created between you and your customer, and
Right.
that's when competitors fill those gaps, then you're in trouble, right? But as long as you keep your organization centric on your users and you're listening, evolving, and growing, and you care about their experience and you care about the patient and you cycle, you'll win no matter what, no matter what anyone else
And
does.
especially in health, where I believe there's still stickiness. If you are good, then there's no reason any of your user would look for a change.
Very much so.
As compared to, let's say, if you are e-commerce, for example, where people could be looking for the cheapest deals. I think that's not how healthcare is. So that's the beauty of healthcare. That's
It
the
is.
advantage of our
It's
sector.
very sticky. You can create a great moat. It's something if you're willing to, be consistent and you're willing to always put them first and not get complacent, the business can be and the customers will tolerate. They'll tolerate a lot. It'll take a while to create that fracture because they'll give you a lot of credit for the value that you've created, but you just can't take too much advantage of that.
Right. Right. So let's talk a bit more about MedTech, because most of your work has been MedTech, and it is one of the most exciting sectors today. We talk about innovation, just like you said, software is just a part, but then, building, that whole ecosystem typically would have, a MedTech aspect is how I would imagine innovation to happen, like replacing the incumbents with smarter, better, efficient, accurate devices, and bringing it, more available and so on. So I personally am very bullish about the medtech trend and the way the market can grow from here. Um, Joe, what would you like see as the biggest challenge as well as opportunities for a medtech startup today? If let's say you were to give this wisdom to someone who's starting out today, or who's at an early stage, like what are those challenges and opportunities?
Well, I do go back to the ability to manage expectations and to manage time. I would really marshal those resources before I hired a big team, before I brought on all these people. I would keep my burn rate as low as possible, and I would really iterate and keep the development tight and small, and I
Mhm.
would iterate and iterate and iterate. I would find ways to manage and capture my data. I would certainly find ways to build out my intellectual property portfolio.
Mhm.
I wouldn't rush myself to be too commercial too quick.
Mhm.
I prepare my investors as to what, they should expect. The worst part of business is getting ahead of yourself, committing to something before it's time, setting expectations with people who are going to hold you to those expectations and then financially punish you for not meeting those expectations.
Right.
Um, Butterfly is an incredible company, but early on when it went out, it really set some really high expectations that I don't think were realistic. And if you look back on the journey of Butterfly, the adoption in the marketplace and its success, it's extraordinary. But it didn't meet the expectation initially that it was set. So
Mhm.
the power of the expectation is extraordinary. And so you don't fall in love and get ahead. Take your journey one step at a time. Keep your team small. Keep your spend low, and really be tight with that core team. And then make sure that you have good data points. Personally, if I was starting a company today, I would manage my expectations. That is where I see most people fail. You don't know how long this journey you're about to embark on is going to take. You don't know how many additional problems you're going to need to solve in order to ultimately come up with the final offering. I would start the journey. I would keep my team very small. I would be very committed to the goal. I'd find clinicians or users who would give you very good unsolicited feedback. I prepare my shareholders for a journey. I'd create very long schedules to create space to ensure that I'm not disappointing anybody or getting ahead of myself. When CEOs get too excited about their technology, or inventors get too excited about their technology, and they start feeling the financial pressures and they want to hit dates and they make commitments, there is the risk that you shortchange the product development. There is risk that you don't go all the way in your customer satisfaction. And then the moment you turn on the commercial engine, then you're burning capital and you're really now held to the delivery for your investors. And that's when, the moment you turn the commercial engine on, you can't back off. You've now set a time where you have to execute. So I would try to incubate as long as possible. I would iterate as long as possible. I'd preserve capital as long as possible. I would wait and get the product to a level of perfection. I'd build up my intellectual property. I'd build out my supply chain. I'd build out everything to allow me to scale before I all of a sudden hit the go button.
Mhm.
Because the moment you hit that go button, you now have put your reputation on the line. You have now you've turned over the sand clock with investors, and I would just make sure that I'm ready. Aside from that, I would also make sure that I'm plugged into modern healthcare, that I'm plugged into I have the ability to get data from the electronic health record. I can get real type data from my experiences, and I'd be able to cycle on that data to get my development correct. And the other thing, if your product has to go through a regulatory process, I'd communicate with the regulatory officials early. Don't try to pull a fast one on them. Don't throw an application over that's not complete. Don't try to get some general indication that gives you the ability to go after something specific. I would sit with regulators. I would tell them what you're trying to accomplish. I would ask for their guidance on what type of data they'd like to see. I would get their agreement on the best ways to acquire that data. And I would slow down the process to make sure that the regulators know exactly what I'm trying to accomplish. So when that application comes, they're expecting it. When they open the first page, they already know what they're going to read. And as they go through the construction of your trial or construction of whatever it is that you did, there's nothing new. It's all you followed their feedback to a T. And then what that's going to do is not only get your clearance through quickly, with an appropriate pace, but it's going to establish credibility between you and the regulators. And then the ability to go back and ask questions, and then
Right.
build as much quality into your device as possible and have the highest level of integrity possible. And if you find something, deal with it and go to regulators and say, we found this, and we deal with it. And that transparency and that relationship will just be so foundational to the integrity. So there's so many different steps to be successful, but it's just about doing the right thing, setting the right expectations, doing what you can to help patients, listen to your customers, and then when you're ready, create partnerships with your regulators. They're not police officers trying to get you. They're people who are empowered to protect the safety of a patient, and you need to respect them and communicate with them. And if you do, your product will not only be approved, you'll have a partner for the evolution of your product going forward. So it's just a couple things
Mhm.
that come to mind.
Right. Well said. Again, you have, I think, covered a very holistic view of the whole journey of MedTech startup. And I really found it good, like the way you mentioned that clinging in for the long-term plan. So not making any choices that probably could be just an ego massage for a short term that, got funded or, got published or, any of the small things, but keeping that, long-term goal and be ready for the long haul. So very well said and aptly put. Um, this has been a great conversation, Joe. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your insights, and thank you so much for sharing all these insights so vividly and in a understandable manner for anybody to consume. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Health Tech with Purpose podcast. Before you leave, make sure to like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And if you would like to see someone on this podcast, do refer to us. My contact details are in the description. Before I leave, I wish you stay healthy, stay curious, and keep building.